Who is Tim Pearce?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. Like I used to tell people I wanted to be a doctor. The teacher was supposed to help you build a career. Literally said, you need to realign your expectations with reality. I was always in trouble. Basically, I'm a little bit ADD. The thing that I think I lacked is someone to say, I believe in you and I want to be that person who's on your side.
What would you say to the audience who either aspire to maybe have their own autonomy, go out on their own, as so many people are thinking of doing?
You can think of it as a vision and an anti-vision. The thing they're afraid of is wrapped up in the thing that they want. You already know you want to. You're just wasting brain power, spending 5 years thinking about whether or not you should start a business. Because I realized my own power. I'd actually felt it. It wasn't just a theory anymore. Don't focus on the pain, just focus on the running.
This is a pretty big moment for me because, I have been inspired by people in this industry to sort of do some of the things I'm doing, and you are really a big part of that. I have to say, you came to my attention quite a few years ago. I think it was one that you and Miranda were doing together, and I thought, wow, what an informative thing, and what a way to be able to, in a relatively casual way, give value and engage. So I appreciate all that you've done for the profession, and both you and Miranda, but I really appreciate how much you've impacted me. And it was such a bonus. I shared with Felix recently that there was something that drew me to go to Switzerland last year. And it was really not about aesthetics as much. It was just something drawing me to go there. And there's been a lot of changes in my personal life by meeting you. I told you about meeting some of your team and Layla, and meeting Miranda. So I just want to start off by saying thank you. It's an honor for me to be able to have you here today. I appreciate you making time.
Oh, it's a huge honor for me. I mean, I'm reaching the stage of my career I never thought I'd saw coming. I thought I'd just build a clinic and no one would know about me. That's honestly what I thought, which is the total opposite. But what I found like most rewarding is actually seeing other people now rising up, and being able to take some small amount of credit for that is great, So I know the hard work is in what you're doing now and asking for the podcast and setting it up and all that stuff. But the inspiration, if I'm a small part of the inspiration, that's an amazing thing to do for people. So I'm always very happy when I see people start a podcast, and I think some people think I'm too big to be asked to be on the podcast, which is kind of funny to me because that's not how it feels on this side. But I basically say yes to most people who ask me who have a podcast,
Sure.
Because I like to support people when I could see, because I know what it's like at that early stage, and it's a great way of connecting and understanding people. So I also do it because I like to hear what people are actually up against. And a meaningful conversation is really where the heart of aesthetics is. If you can have meaningful conversations with your patients, with your staff, and with people on podcasts, like, you grow so much quicker. So I'm always pleased to be part of that, even if it's just at the inspiration stage.
Well, it's funny, Tim. I'm just gonna follow up on that because you said it gives you joy about the inspiration, and you talk about the inspiration stage, and it's funny you should use that word because it's a really important word to me. And it's clear that what gives you the pleasure is not the fame that you've achieved, is that you have inspired someone else. So let's talk about inspiration. And so tell me what your view of inspiration is, how you view it. Is it a conscious thing? Do you try to do it? Tell me a little bit about that. Well,
it's a really interesting question. I spend a lot of time thinking about the whole process of what causes a human to transform, because I think it's key in the aesthetic consultation, but actually it's been an underlying question in my life always. Like, what is my potential, and where am I being led to sort of do things, and why? So my theory of inspiration is that when you feel inspired to do something, the only reason you'd feel inspired is because you have the potential to do it on some level. If you believe the unconscious mind is somewhat connected to reality, and it's digesting your life and the surroundings, and then throwing little carrots in your way to make you think about what you could do that would be even better, then I like to think of inspiration as like a guiding light. I think it's based on something real, and when you feel excited about doing something, you should probably pursue it, even if it feels many times too big, or maybe you're not the person to do it, and all the imposter stuff that people have. I think there's almost, just by being inspired, you could consider that a degree of validation that you should go for it, because I don't think you'd be inspired by something that wasn't on some level leading you in the right direction. It's not necessarily that you have to get all the way to where the inspiration is, but I think there's gold along the journey, even just to try, even if you don't get all the way. It's just the stuff you learn. It's one of the things I always try and get out of my patients and out of other clinicians. If I think, and Miranda as well is a great example. So I'll tell you the story. It might be an interesting way of making the point, which is she had this, it felt inspired to want to speak on stage at this big convention that she went to. And there was no connection to her doing that and our business. It basically looked from the outside like a complete distraction. But she wanted to do it. And so she went for it. And I remember thinking at the time, that's not going to happen, because there's so many people who want to do that. Everyone we met seemed to want to do that.
The one in Florida, right?
Yeah, the one in Florida. So, but what was interesting is she started to the thing about inspiration is once you accept your goal, you start to see the landscape differently. And she started to see things that no one else could see, because her brain was saying, that's relevant to my goal. And what she did is she pulled our whole business into this ecosystem of very successful people who were doing really well online. And just because she had this vision of speaking on stage, and it really was fantastic for us, but without any strategic link whatsoever. Like, I would never have said that's a great move for the business, but it ended up being a really good thing. And then she somehow pulled it off, and she got to be on stage, and she lived her dream in that way, and she learned a lot from the whole process. And I don't know, it's almost something kind of sort of magical about that kind of inspiration. And I hope that anyone who feels inspired goes after it, because I also think it's the heart of being a decent person, as you're creating rather than all the other things you can do with your time. So anyone who feels inspired is going down the route of creating something, and I think that's good for everyone. Even if you never achieve the end goal, you're going to learn a lot on the way.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack in that. I've got to explore deeper, because you touched upon something that I love. You talked about once she got this idea, she started seeing those things. Tell me your vision. You expand upon the filter and what, when you have a vision, how you changes your filter and what you see. What's your perception of that?
Yeah, so I think if you want to understand people, you need to understand their hopes and fears. And that until you really deeply understand what someone is hoping for and something someone is afraid of, you don't understand what that person's actually all about. So, and this is because everyone has a unique set of hopes and fears, and you can think of it as a vision and an anti-vision is my new way of thinking about it. And they often are overlapped, and that's actually why people get stuck sometimes, is sometimes the thing they're afraid of is wrapped up in the thing that they want. You know, typically, for example, it's social media. I want to build a business and I want to be known, but I hate going on social media because then someone might criticize me. So the anti-vision and the vision stop growth unless you remove the risk factors. But what I love about knowing people's visions and getting into that world is that you actually figure out that they're on they're a different planet to you, because when you have a very clear vision of what you want and a very clear vision of what you don't want, and that's unique, the way that you navigate the world is completely unique. So it is the most unique thing about people is their hopes and fears, their goals, their anti-vision and their vision. When you're managing patients, for example, you need to be very clear about what those are. Otherwise, you get stuck all the time. It's to do with this reticular activating system. It's a part of our brain that filters everything. Most people have heard of it now, but it's a really cool idea because it essentially quietens down things that are not part of your list of hopes and fears and makes everything else rise to the surface. And you literally don't see the things that are not relevant to your goals or the things you want to avoid. And this is why I think so often on social media, people scream at each other and they seem to be, particularly with political stuff. And like I told you before we came on, my brother's in it, acts in makes some political content. And he feels like half the world is mad. And that's how we often feel, I think, when you're not part of really understanding what their hopes and fears are, because as soon as you figure that out, you can explain a lot of the madness. And they're actually not mad. They just have very separate goals, and they relate things together differently. But I think it's one of the key things with understanding people. And if you're going to lead a team, you need to understand that. I know we're going to talk about leadership later. And if you're going to make social media content, you need to understand that. It's really the nub of dealing successfully with people is to get to that level.
Yeah, I love that. I think we're talking about leadership right now. I think we've already started, Tim. And I love what you're saying about the vision filter. It's sort of why, if I'm in a conference room and ophthalmologists are in there, they'll notice everyone with glasses on. I used to be a urologist. I notice people who get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of a talk. It's just your background. So that's getting a little too personal, but. So let me go back to my original, I was going to start with this question, but we got into this so quickly, but I do have to ask this question. Who is Tim Pearce?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. So this is also a link to how I try to make sense of things. I think people are better judged by what they do than what they say they do. So, it's a definition of belief, actually, that if you want to know what people really believe, have a look at how they behave and the results that generates, and then you'll know who they are. But if you ask them who they are, you'll get, the thing we all have to create, which is the things we've done in the past and the things we are proud of. But to actually figure out who someone is, I think that you need to kind of observe the impact of their actions over a long period of time. So I can attempt to try and answer that in that I think what is boiling down to be what I think my fundamental role will be in my career is to help clinicians deepen the value that they bring to their patients. So that means that we don't simply we aren't simply vending machines for the thing that they ask for, but we actually care about the impact of that thing. And what I'm really interested in doing next is being involved in this new wave of longevity and health and helping clinicians make good clinical decisions in what's actually a really complex sphere as well. So the patients get more value out of their practitioners, and the practitioners who do that well also get loads of value out. But I would like to play a role in deepening the value that clinicians bring to their patients, probably through education.
So if I could just ask you to take a filter of career out of this, I would just like to follow up with the question. So taking the professional filter out of this, the follow-up question is, who is Tim Pearce?
Okay. I like the challenge. So here's something I think is going on under the surface. I think most people are trying to heal from past traumas. Their adult life is about trying to heal the trauma in their childhood on some level, or they're repeating, and they're not dealing with it, but they're repeating the trauma from their childhood. So if I look back at my childhood, a lot of what I do now is the opposite of what I experienced as a child. So I experienced being made to feel in the way and insignificant in the face of adults. I experienced a lack of good paternalism. So I think paternalism is actually used as a bad word, but really what a good paternal figure is someone who guides you and cares about the outcome, not someone who just observes you or is near. It's that sense of, what are your struggles? What are you going through? How can I help you empower yourself to take control of that? So I didn't experience a lot of that. I grew up in South Africa, and I had a very authoritarian schooling system where I was sort of told what to do, and everyone is in a hierarchy, and I was actually always at the bottom of the hierarchy. So in South African schools, I'm not sure what it's like in the States, but you whatever achievement you get, you wear it on your uniform. So you get badges all the way up, and eventually you get a different color blazer if you've done the best in various categories. So you literally look different to everyone. And I never got a single one of those badges for anything. And I was always in trouble. Basically I'm a little bit ADD, so I need a lot of attention to keep me occupied, a lot of activity. And I need to see the purpose in it for myself. I don't do it just because someone else says it's important. So that ends up in a very structured, overly structured system. It ends up in you being in trouble a lot and doing very well. And the thing that I think I lacked is someone to say, I believe in you, and I want to. I think you can solve this problem. Let's talk it through and come up with what your next step will be. And I felt like I just got boundaries without any guidance, and it's not because my parents, I love my dad and my mum, and they were there, but my mum was unpredictable. She was I think even more ADD than I've ever been, very chaotic. And my dad's lovely. He's about to move closer to me. We have a great relationship, but he's very passive. He gets on with his own thing, and he wasn't behind me. So I try and be behind other people. That's what I've realized. What my driving force is I want to be that person who's on your side. I genuinely am on people's side. I believe in people. Most people have good intentions. I often think they're on a part of their journey that isn't producing good outcomes. So I'm not saying bad people don't exist, but I choose to believe that there's a journey that they're on, and maybe they'll get better over time, because I find that a lot easier than believing that people are fundamentally broken. So I try and be the person who's on their side, because I think I experienced a long period of my life where people were not on my side and thought I was a bad kid because I wasn't doing the things that they expected of me. So I try and make up for that in the way that I deal with people.
Wow. I mean, having no badges in a classroom where most people get at least some and some have a lot, I mean, how did that feel?
Well, I actually am grateful for it now. I remember one particular moment, if you want to ask how it feels, it was a prize-giving ceremony, and I was sitting and you never knew who was going to get the prize. It was quite opaque, the system. If I look back, I didn't really have a sense of, I think it was actually a little bit corrupt. It felt that way anyway to me in terms of who got things. So you had to be, and my parents, they also upset the school because my dad managed a children's home. So he was in charge of hundreds of children, and it was in the days of corporal punishment. They used to hit the kids who were naughty, and he was always trying to stop them hitting these poor orphan kids who were naughty and trying to get some other way of, and so the school didn't like me because he didn't like the school. And anyway, there was all that politics in the background, which probably made things worse. But the moment I remember was sitting in an assembly while they were giving out certificates to basically nearly at least half the room, and just slowly realizing that it wasn't going to be me until everyone had got up with their certificates, and I was sitting on the floor, and I had this huge space around me before there were any other children, just by myself, while everyone I knew seemed to be on stage. And I remember just sitting there, just feeling like absolutely nobody, and just this horrible sense of shame, and just uselessness. But then I thought, I think something happened as a self-defense, which is I had to believe that I could fix this in the future, and that it was okay to be nobody. And actually, I think it's one of the things that enables me to produce a bucket load of content is that I'm okay with failing, because that's my emotional home, is just not as a failure, but as zero. And at zero, you've got tons of potential. So it's not. I never thought I was a -10. I never swallowed the pill that I was a bad kid, but I had a lot of. The way I negotiated with the lack of output and the lack of any sign that I was going to amount to anything was that I had to believe in potential. So those moments of feeling basically like I was a complete loser, I had to negotiate with myself and think, I won't accept that. But so the only alternative is to accept that I can I can somehow fix this in the future. And I always think I can fix things in the future, and it enables me to confront failure, and I immediately have the same emotional response, which is, it's fine, I'll just rebuild and fix it in the future. And that enables me to keep going without taking it as a signal that I'm a failure, basically.
How does the kid with no external signs, no badges, then become, what happened? How did this happen? I mean, you could have gone a different way. Was there a time that you sort of transitioned into more successful outcomes, or was there someone who inspired you? What happened?
I think the combination of firstly always believing in my potential, even though I didn't have any external evidence of it, it didn't stop me from trying to do things. Like, I used to tell people I wanted to be a doctor for years before anyone thought that was a good idea. In fact, my PSC teacher, which is the teacher who's supposed to help you build a career, literally said, you need to realign your expectations with reality.
No way!
Yeah, at the time I wanted to be a pediatrician, and I spelled pediatrician the American way, and he said, you can't even spell the thing you want to be. You need to. So, but I mean, there's an element of I'll tell you something else which I found out quite interesting, which I've always tried to grapple with, is sometimes people who don't know me think I'm arrogant. And I don't, because I'm really not. I'm the opposite. I feel like I'm very humble, and the reason is because I don't care what people think. And I've learned to not care what people think. I take it as feedback, but I don't take it as reality. And so that teacher was just one more person who was just saying something that didn't match with what I believed to be true. And that could be seen as arrogance. I'm just going to be a doctor anyway, even though everyone thinks I can't do it. But you're right. There has to be a crucial moment where you start to become aligned with reality. And for me, I think the first time was because I emigrated as 1994. I had 2 years of just utter failure at school, and I kind of gave up because I didn't think I could win in this situation. And then I finally got into doing more sciencey subjects, and I remember doing physics for the first time and thinking, I actually find this really interesting. And it wasn't like I was working to pass the exam, but I started to enjoy it. And then I got an exam paper back, and I got what was a relatively good grade. And the guy next to me, I'll never forget, he looks at me and is like, "That's not your paper, is it?"
You had to prove it was really you.
Yeah, but part of me didn't really agree. It's like and then so there was this shock. So there was this shock of like, hey, well, like all those things I think might be true about myself, this is the first bit of evidence that it's true. Like maybe I can actually do quite well if I apply myself. So it's that connection with effort and reward. It's one of the things I try and do as a dad, is try and make my kids see the connection between effort and reward, because reward, without effort is really bad for you, but same with effort. If you don't get anything back, there's a moment. In fact, I think of it, I always think of this moment. I was driving on the motorway and I saw a little boy waving from the bridge. And I thought, I really want to wave back to him and then after I was driving off, it's like, why was I so determined to wave back to that little boy on the bridge? And it's because I want everyone to know that if you put something out, you get something back. And I think that's the key moment in my life, was just realizing, if I put something out, I get something back. And that's the key. I need to go after the things where I want to get something back, I need to put something out. And once that clicked, then I found it easier to apply myself, because I realized my own power. I'd actually felt it. It wasn't just a theory anymore, like a psychological way of keeping myself safe. It actually was a real thing I could do to get a result back.
Wow. Approximately what age were you when that physics test came back? What was your...
I must have been 16. So pretty old, pretty far into the school system.
Wow.
I always joke that the secret to being free of judgment is to chronically disappoint people for many, many years. So there was many years of chronic disappointment, and that kind of freed me from everyone's expectations. And then I got to do whatever I thought I should do. So
it may not be the typical route, but if it works, yeah. So we've sort of touched on that, but let me follow up with, again, I'm going to start out by saying, taking out the professional filter of the filter of your profession and career. I guess the question then is, so what does Tim Pearce do? What does he do?
I spend a lot of time reflecting, thinking, and trying to get things right. I think I'm trying to this is more actually as I've gone on. I used to have a theory that I could just Google things and I'd find the answer. And obviously you can in terms of information, but in terms of really understanding stuff, my working theory now is you have to expose yourself to things that are challenging or new, at least in some way. And that's that, and then I try and pass that on to other people. So a lot of my brain space is spent thinking about that question, why am I doing this thing? Am I doing the right thing? It sounds like insecurity, but it's more around growth. Am I optimizing my life to achieve the things that I'm capable of, and am I helping particularly the people around me do that in the right way by understanding stuff more? So I'm trying to figure life out and then pass it on. I think that's what I'm doing.
I would reflect back that I think that's what you're doing too in an impactful way. I'm still sort of a little bit shocked here. The fact that someone would describe you as arrogant is the last thing that comes to mind. When I talk about my meeting you in person, it was like there are people I meet who just are a calming presence and who really make you feel listened to, and you're just one of them. And it's quite remarkable that some people have that power and that skill. It's a nice skill to have. I can't imagine anyone calling you arrogant. But we talked a little bit. I guess the question I have is, why does Tim Pearce either start or run Skin Viva and Skin Viva Academy versus Tim Pearce being someone who works there? Why are you the person who either started or runs it? Why is that?
That's an interesting question. Because I could have gone down that route. I tried to get jobs at various places. I don't think I saw myself as entrepreneurial as I actually am until I'd seen it play out. So, but I think the seeds were always there. So one of the reasons is I always think I can see things better than the way they are currently. So when I was working in the NHS, there was quite a few times I tried to change the whole system. One of the things I saw was a problem in emergency departments is that the feedback between the junior staff and the senior staff was non-existent. So you'd be taught something by a senior member of staff that was wrong, and then no one would say anything back because that was a big personality. And so, it would say, I wanted to solve that problem. So I came up with a whole system that we could use that would remove the social risk of giving feedback. And then no one wanted to do it. So it kind of annoyed me that I couldn't make it better than it was. I think that's the key is ideas. Like there's a great book called Rocket Fuel, which has helped me a lot understand where I fit in. But if you're a visionary type, you're always seeing a future that's better than the past, and you want to build it, and it excites you, the idea of building it. So I tried to do that within the NHS and basically got nowhere. And then I wanted to have a life where I had the ability to do more of that. So autonomy is a big driver for me. It's woven into a lot of my belief systems. I believe that freedom of the individual is good for everyone, to an extent, obviously not complete freedom, but to be creative. Let's put it that way. Freedom to be creative should be the most protected thing. And I wanted to protect my ability to be free, so I had to create a situation where I could do that. And I wasn't particularly interested in beauty. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it was. But I suddenly, when my friend told me about medical aesthetics, like that is the fastest way I can get autonomy, because otherwise I'm another 10 years in training, and even then I don't have a route out to do something on my own, because private practice is a much smaller thing in the UK than it will be for you guys as well. Anyway, I decided I had to start something. And as soon as something clicks for me, then I start to move towards it. It's only been something recently I've discovered that just because it clicks for me doesn't mean everyone else understands what I'm doing. So that's part of the leadership thing maybe we'll touch on, is that you need to bring that, make that clear to people. But for me, I think it was about autonomy, creativity. Those are my driving forces. I love creativity. I get very excited about picturing something that exists that didn't exist before I thought of it. And that pulls me through a lot of hard work.
Yeah. I heard a great quote. I think it was Cynic who said, small business owners own small businesses, entrepreneurs solve problems. Two different things. What would you say to the audience? Because I think much of our audience is in aesthetics who either aspire to maybe have their own autonomy, and why should they consider it or not consider it? What are the road ahead of them that they're facing if they're going to go out on their own, as so many people are thinking of doing? What would you say to them?
Here's something I've only really crystallized in the last week, which might help, which is I think humans spend a huge amount of time deciding whether or not they should do something, and not enough time trying to solve the problems of doing it. And part of it comes from maybe an unconscious belief that if you know what you're doing, it'll feel easy. And the truth is the opposite. Like, actually, anything new that you've never done before is really hard. But the answer is, like, you really should, if you want those things, you should stop wondering about whether you should go after it, because you already know the answer. You want them. You want autonomy. So you need to start acting autonomously and start going after the thing that you want, rather than spending 5 years thinking about whether or not you should start a business. Because you already know you want to. You're wasting brain power on the option that you shouldn't do it. It's essentially this idea of commitment. Like stop wondering and commit to who you are as a person and go and do it. It's really powerful. I use this because I still work in the NHS, and I use this with a lot of suicidal patients. It's a story which so far, it's a little bit risky, which you'll see as I play it out, but so far it's worked really well. And it came from a friend of mine who was, I know this is a bit of a tangent, but it's related. She was suicidal on and off for years, and she told me the story about how she was walking along the road one day, thinking about jumping in front of a truck and crying on her way to work. And she suddenly stopped and she said to herself, right, either jump in front of a truck or never ask the question again. And that moment was when her life improved, because obviously she committed to not thinking about suicide. Now, the thing that always excites me about that is that how the power of commitment to who you actually are as a person and what you want is the most fundamental basis for actually growing and developing, because otherwise you will spin on all the potential things you might do one day. And, I think it's really important just to accept who you are and what you want and stop wondering about those things and just go for it.
Tim, that's really deep. You turned me on to a book, 10X is Easier Than 2X, which then led me to read one of his subsequent books called Your Future Self. And I don't know if you've read any of that stuff, but it's exactly what you're talking about. Envision your future self, and then you move towards that. And so it's a lot about filters. Yeah, I really like that. How do you, at Skin Viva training, Skin Viva Clinic, and in your own team, whom I've had the pleasure of meeting, how do you lead? How do you lead that team?
So, it might actually be quite interesting to touch on the areas where I think I haven't been a good leader as we go through this. So we should come back to that. I think the thing that I'm good at is I think people detect that I actually want an outcome for the world. That's one of the things I pick up even when I interview people, is they say, I can see that you're not just about selling filler or whatever the issue is that they picked up. So I think it's really important for people to see some alignment with the bottom line and some benefit for the world. So I think I'm good at demonstrating that I actually care about the outcome, and that makes people care about the other things that follow from that, like the bottom line. I think there are some people who are motivated more than enough just by getting a financial reward, but I would say the average person needs something else as well. They're usually in both. People need to be valued in paper, not just emotionally. But at the same time, I think that's one of the things people get about me, is I have an authenticity around what I'm trying to do that they believe in, and that makes it easier to do some of the harder stuff. So that's one of the things that I'm good at. There are things I'm not good at, though, which I think would be quite interesting. I'd like to hear your thoughts on as well. And one of them is actually selecting people who are actually pursuing the same goal, and not allowing other people's goals to pull us off course. Because I had you've quoted Simon Sinek already, and I used to like a lot of his stuff, and I realized there's some missing stuff that he talks about. Now, the start with why is one example, and starting with why is absolutely the kind of thing I believe in. But if you hire someone who has a different why, and you don't spot that, and they have a position of influence in your business, and you don't get them out, they can cause chaos in your business. And I've had that a couple of times. I think we've probably had about 35 clinicians pass through our business, and I'd say 95% of them get it, are in alignment, but it only takes a very small percentage before your whole business becomes a much less happy place because of two people with different whys. That's kind of how I experienced some of the hardest parts of leading a team was I wasn't good enough at spotting the bad eggs and getting rid of them, because I thought I could fix them, and I kind of, all the stuff that makes me good with patients actually made me bad at defending the business. And I have a friend right now in Scotland who's having a battle that's similar to this. And I would say basically you can't be the clinician for your staff. You can't be the one who's always trying to get the best outcome for them. You actually have to be the clinician for your business. Like, you need to be caring about the health of your business, not only trying to make everyone who had a tough childhood like better while you try and run a business around that. You know, it's comes a point where it's not your responsibility that they had a bad childhood and they caused chaos in the team. You have to look after the team and get rid of those people, which is the opposite of how most doctors would see someone who was clearly not happy.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned you want to hear my take on it. Let me say that I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around the whys and around Simon. And I would respectfully say to you, I think you're a little bit off in the sense that you can't and you don't want to hire people who have the same why as you, because we each have our own why, and we have only one why, and it's formed at a very young age. What you want, Tim, is people who believe in your just cause. You might call it a vision statement, a mission statement. We talked about this. You can't surround yourself with people who have the same why, nor should you, but you have a just cause to. I believe that your just cause is to really improve people's lives and give back. And you do that through your training, and at Skin Viva, you do that through making people feel good about themselves. It's not about the Botox and fillers. And then benefits to that come along. You have to have people who believe what you believe in that just cause. And you can have many just causes. They may have a why that's more towards helping others. They may have a why towards teaching, creative teaching, but they all have to believe in your just cause. That's what they have to believe in. And to do that, you and I have talked about this, you have to be able to really crystallize what is your just cause, come up with it in a sentence, and it has to be inclusive, it has to be something everyone can participate in, and it has to be of benefit to everyone in the world. And then you, as a leader, I believe you have to, I'm talking too much, but you have to then elucidate that and verbalize that all the time. So I would, I love this dialogue, and that's my 2 cents in it. I may be wrong. I'm a surgeon. I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt. So sorry about that. But that's my 2 cents. It's not the whys, it's the just cause. But you're right. If you have a strong culture, a new person will adopt that culture. But if you have a weak culture, your culture then becomes part of what that person's like, and that's death for the organization.
Mm-hmm. So what I experienced with people is I realized that a lot of our behavior is fractal, so it repeats in different situations. And if you ever this is often most noticeable with more the dysfunctional people, because the people who are functional, you just think they're lovely people and they just go around having lovely experiences. But the dysfunctional people cause unhappiness wherever they go. And it's something I often say with clinicians who are battling with a particularly difficult complaint from someone and it seems unjust how they're being treated is, some people are caused unhappiness by a situation, but other people are looking for a situation to be unhappy. Once you figure that out, it lets you no longer blame yourself for this unhappiness because you can see it. So you're like, oh, okay, the same thing happened at the last clinic and the 2 others before, and now I realize this isn't me failing. This is someone who's unhappy on a different level, and they're now playing out the same unhappiness with me. So when I say why, and I'm happy to change the term to just they don't share the just cause. So basically, some people are they're not optimizing to get the result that you want. Put it that way. They may say that they are, and this is where it gets tricky. Like they might say, "Oh, that's great. I care about patients. I want to make patients happy," but all of their emotional wiring is about something totally different. And so I used to spend a lot of time basically doing therapy with people, like trying to get to the bottom of like. And it sounds crazy, but I go into these conversations quite willingly because I believe at the bottom I can find a glorious, perfect person who just needs an idea realigned, and I'll try and help them over that. But you can't. It's very hard to change someone's personality. So if you get someone in who's got let's not call it a why. It's more some sort of need that they're trying to meet that's dysfunctional. You end up diverting resources away from the people who are actually trying to achieve the mission to the one who's unhappy all the time. And my weakness as a leader was to spend way too long trying to fix people instead of just say, it's not working out, you need to find a different place. Because I think it damaged my team at one particular point. We had a great time, like up until like 2014, 15, it was great. And then we just a couple of people with insecurities came in and I couldn't handle it. The team was also big. That's the other problem with leadership. Like, I'm very interested in people who manage really big teams, because I've managed, the most we ever had was about 38. And that was a bit too much for me, if I'm honest. Like, I do really well. Currently, our team's really happy. You feel connected. We've got 15 in this business and about 30 in the other, and that's okay. But trying to do with me as a figurehead for all of them while working full time in the clinic, I wasn't great at it. So, and I've heard this said about creative people that they tend to be better at managing smaller teams. I'm always trying to learn though, try and figure it out.
Yeah, no, I love that, Tim. You know, Felix is struggling with this too. You get to a certain size and it's hard. I think you know, I've in the little bit I've able to observe you, I would say you're certainly a quiet leader, but a very inspirational one. And I agree. If you have a bad apple, you have to get rid of them sooner. And that's been my shortcoming too. But I'm trying to get better at it. Yeah. Who in your life, tell me about a time when someone did something for you that you made them consider a great leader. You consider them a great leader, and tell me about why it could have been in your medical training or in your personal life. Why were they a great leader in your mind? What did they do?
Probably one of my longest held kind of people that I look up to would be Nelson Mandela. That's not super close to me. I don't know if that's...
That's okay.
But obviously, I grew up in South Africa. I did not appreciate at the time, because I was 14, exactly what was going on. In fact, one of my biggest regrets is that just after the elections, when I was a child, I found some election posters, one of which was a Nelson Mandela election poster, and it was these big pieces of cardboard, and we slid down the hill on them for ages and then left them there. And I always regret not keeping that poster. It would have been such a great memento. But what I loved about Nelson Mandela is that he basically did not allow anger to dictate his response, and I think he basically spent a lot of time getting into the minds of the people who he had to win over. Like, there's not an option where, I suppose some people see it as an option, but where you could just hate the people who persecuted you. So he did a lot of things in the transition to power where he demonstrated a kind of respect for the people who had persecuted him. So he would speak in Afrikaans when he could. I know he went to famously, if you watch the documentary on it, he went, which was as true as any of these documentaries can be, he went to the South African World Cup and supported the Springboks and wore a Springbok jersey. And that was a huge moment for Afrikaans people to see him encouraging their sport and being a supporter of them. I think it won a lot of people over. So I think a lot of leadership is about trying to get your own anger and personal kind of pain out the way and try and make a decision and try and demonstrate connection and with people who actually have not done that for you. You know, I think that's one of the hardest things to do. So Nelson Mandela would be the best example I can think of a leader, because he left so much anger that would have been totally justifiable. It would have been he was in jail for 27 years, and he could easily have come out and wanted revenge, but instead he worked towards a bigger goal, which is just try and unite the country, despite what had happened to him. And I think if you can do that, that's the ultimate gift for everyone. And there's extremely few leaders like that. I mean, the world needs them now, but there are very few who are doing anything other than basically pushing their own side's cause rather than trying to bring both sides together.
Yeah, I never would have imagined you answering that, and now I can't imagine you answering anything else. That is so fitting for you. I think there are very few worldwide figures that I consider leaders that are just universally loved, and Nelson Mandela is one of those few. And as I said, I view you as a more quiet leader, and I think Nelson Mandela was more of a quiet leader who led by his example of love, not hate. Martin Luther King comes to mind, and letting go of the hate and just talking not about what your plan is, but what you believe, and just that love. And I thank you for sharing that, because it makes tremendous sense. Tim, you do many different things, and I believe that sculpting is a thing for you. I just want to delve a little bit into what that gives you, what that brings you, and we haven't talked. I don't want to talk too much about the clinical part of aesthetics, but I do want to hear about, does that inspire you and help you inspire others?
So yeah, during lockdown I had very little else to do, so I got into sculpting, and I would highly recommend it for anyone, because and I do this because I've actually a few times made clinicians sculpt at job interviews, which is quite funny, because they arrived, in their suits for a job, and I was like, right. And I thought, because I wanted to see how good they were at understanding actually basically reflecting what they think they understand beauty to be into something that's actually visible. And it's a hard thing to do at a job interview. I made it harder by making it a horse's head instead of a human head, because I wanted to benchmark myself.
Wow.
Because I wanted to see, can you translate what you see into something physical? And it was helpful. It wasn't the be all and end all, I have to say. The clinicians who went through that, the first one who got selected didn't actually do that well, and the one who then was the runner-up actually ended up really good. So that taught me you can learn this stuff. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do sculpting, is I wanted to go through that process of having an ugly first draft and then doing it 4 or 5 times and seeing how good I could get. And every single time I felt significantly better. And this is what, because I think a lot of people hear these things and think, oh, if you haven't got the gift, then you're never going to be good in it. And they're almost terrified to try, because they might find their ugly alien head looks awful and then they can't inject anymore. And the total opposite is my message, which is have a go at it. Be okay with the discomfort when you look at the ugly thing you've created, and then try again and again and again. And every time, there's this beautiful thing which I like about sculpting, which is the conflict between you feel like you're making progress and you're getting it right, and then you look away and then you look back at it and you think, it just looks like an alien. For me, it was often alien-like. And then what I liked doing was saying, what is it about this that isn't quite right? Like, force yourself to think harder about every contour and proportion and detail, and then make an adjustment. And then what happens is, you have a theory, you put the theory into practice by making an adjustment, and then when you get it right, it's like taking a drug. It's this euphoria of like, I get it, I see it now. And then that's just a slightly addictive process. If it wasn't so messy, I haven't done it for a while because we moved house. I used to have a very nice shed that was useful for this, but it's this euphoric process of actually understanding what your unconscious mind already knows in the conscious level, because that's what it's all about. Because we all know what people look like. You know when someone doesn't look right, we all instinctually. But when you have to try and control those variables, you've got to use a different part of your brain, and it's the connection between that subconscious ancient idea of what good looks like with the conscious understanding of how to create it that creates this beautiful moment of understanding that you can then use in the future as well.
Mm-hmm. I love, yeah. Tell me, I have to ask you, because you and I have had some conversations about your boys and the way that your countenance, everything about you changes when you talk about your boys. And now I know a little background about your childhood, and how are you a father and a leader to your 2 boys, and how does that give back to you and teach you and inform you about how you treat the world?
I'm still figuring all this stuff out, but it is very connected to my deepest purpose. So I consider that my primary identity is just being a father, and so it's interesting what you say about in terms of leadership. I've learned the hard way that the information and the pep talks I give them don't actually go in the way that I would like. This is a funny story, which is, you won't be expecting this to come up, but I remember giving a really heartfelt speech to Jasper about, he was being bullied at the time, and I was trying to help him understand it, and I don't know what part of him did this, but he just got out the shower, and he just said to me right at the end, as I got to the punchline of what I thought was a really good one, he just looked at me and said, "Meanwhile, Jasper was scratching his anus."
Okay.
So, and this is the kind of things you deal with all the time. Is like you're doing your best, and their brains, they just don't receive information in quite that way yet. So anyway, there's maybe some part of him that's just being mischievous and just wants to do a joke. And obviously that kind of terminology, I'm sure it's the same in your house. Like, you're a doctor, you use these words. You don't have any, I just use the right medical terminology. And he's only like 6 when he said that. But we still laugh about it now. But it ties up to something which is, I don't think children absorb words. I think they watch you and they learn. And that's way more powerful than the things that you like to be true. And I actually think that's more, it links back to what I say about what do people really believe is not what they say they believe. It's what they actually do. And not just what they do, it's the outcomes they generate. Because you don't keep doing something if it produces an outcome that isn't consistent with your core beliefs. So if whatever someone is doing, that's how your children learn from you. They see us doing things and it broadens their horizons. And that's one of the reasons why we take them places. Like when Miranda did her talk on stage, we took them out of school for that, because I thought there's nothing they're going to learn at school that'll be more powerful than seeing their mum on stage in terms of broadening their horizons. So I think a lot about that. It's tricky because that means I'm less in control of it, because I'm actually less in control of my core beliefs. They kind of are what they are, and I shift them occasionally, but I'm aware that they see me exercising and they have a value around exercise, and they see me doing videos, and that makes them think, well, maybe we could do videos, and they listen in on the conversations, and sometimes they say things back. Like, I had a great moment with Jasper the other day when we were running, and he suddenly just said something which I've tried to get across to him many times, which is, oh, I get it, don't focus on the pain, just focus on the running. And that's one of the things I try and get across, is that it's so easy as a human to stare at the problem instead of the solution. And I was really pleased that he got that one. But I think the main thing I'm doing, I talk a lot with them. I structure my day around them. I like to get them up for school. I like to, every single night, put them to bed. We have dinner together. I don't miss any of that stuff. I know a lot of people in my position, or with the opportunities I have, would be traveling more and doing more stuff. And I say no to a lot of stuff, huge amounts of stuff, because I just want to be consistent in their lives. And hopefully they're absorbing from me the good stuff as they go along and learning from the mistakes.
Yeah, you're making the right choices. I can tell you that you don't get that time back. That's for sure. I will tell you, unless you're the mom or dad of a boy of an XY chromosome, you may not understand that comment that Jasper made. But only a boy. I can only see one of my boys, not my girl, saying that. But Tim, in my life, I come up with quotes on things, and that just totally get the message across. So I'm going to steal that. I just want to let you know that whenever you're talking to someone, and then at the end you get the feeling like they didn't really hear that. My shortcut for that is going to be, meanwhile, Jasper is scratching his anus. That's going to be my new phrase. I just love it. So thank you for that. I want to thank you. I want to ask you, having met in person, having the privilege of meeting both you and Miranda, you are very different personalities, which is probably a lot of why you click. Does how she leads the boys impact on balancing that out, or what's your vision of that? And I'll have to, just be fair, I have to remember to come around when I get Miranda on. I'm going to have to ask her that too, because I want your take on how the interplay of your leadership style, her leadership style, molds into your two lovely boys.
It's actually quite similar to how we work at work, which is I create more of a vision, and then she actually creates the structure. So now we share, one of the lovely things I can say about Miranda, I can say nothing more lovely about her, is that I've had various points of health anxiety where I've confronted the thoughts of my own death, because my mum died quite young of a disease which I'm at slightly higher risk of. Because I remember the reassuring thought was, at least I have a wife who I can trust my children with. Mm-hmm. I can fully say that she will do things exactly how I think would be right to keep them, to help them have the best life possible. So we agree a lot on some very important values to me about growth and all the things we've touched on in this podcast, really. And but on a day-to-day basis, she is building the structure around them and making sure that the basics, because I'm a little bit chaotic still, so I will forget things that she doesn't. And then if you ask the kids, they do say those sort of classic mum and dad differences, which is, mum, essentially, it's that saying that mum keeps you alive and dad teaches you how to live. She's also teaching them how to live, but she's definitely doing a lot of the keeping them alive. And I'm pushing the boundaries and saying, yeah, look, get on your bike. We're now running around the block every day. We're not just. So I'm kind of trying to push them and to get out and do more stuff. And she makes sure that they're kind of safe and loved the rest of the time. But we overlap in both of those domains. It's not entirely one way or the other. But it'd be an interesting question to ask my kids how they see us. They're getting to the age they'd probably give you a decent answer.
Sure.
They wouldn't give me a decent answer. They'd give you a decent answer.
Yeah. I hear that. Well, is there anything towards and I use the term leadership just so we can communicate, but is there anything that you would think about when I asked you about, coming on about leadership that you would want our audience to know, think about, or anything? I'm just curious, anything we didn't touch on that you sort of vision around leadership?
So I think the person who taught me the most about leadership is probably Super Nanny. and it's just really simple idea of love and boundaries. And actually Felix said something similar in his podcast, which is he thinks that being a good leader is partly about being what a good dad would be. That doesn't mean you can't do it if you're a woman, obviously. But it's that sense of I'm not going to mollycoddle you, because I know you're better than that kind of thing. So I believe in the best of you. I want you to do well. I care about your future, but you have to be pulling towards the company's bigger future as well. And so it's the boundaries that was the bit that I was lacking when I first started. So I'd be good at the love and trying to make people happy, but I wasn't good at creating boundaries to protect the business. So I would say if you're going to start employing people, you need to know yourself as well, because a lot of clinicians fit this bracket. In fact, I'd say it's almost the default, which is your worldview is that you help people feel better, and you have the power to do that. But if you start applying that to every member of staff, you can't always do it, and you need to recognize when you've gone beyond trying to get someone who wants the best for the business and themselves on track versus someone who's never going to want those things and actually needs to find another place. And I'd say most clinicians will hang on to bad apples for too long. And that's for me, that's the hardest part. Still hard. You get better over time because you figure it out, but you need to know yourself. And if you know yourself and you know the outcome for the business and you have love and boundaries, that's basically should amount to a good leadership structure.
Thank you for that. Is there, you had influenced me a lot with some of the recommendations both you and Miranda made to me. Is there any, if there are people who are in aesthetics or just more interested in leadership, any other books? You mentioned Rocket Fuel. Anything else that you would recommend, podcasts or books that come to mind? I'm just curious for our audience.
So Rocket Fuel's great if you are building a team, if you've got a team going and you want to understand what a good shape is. Probably one of the most influential books I've come across is Never Split the Difference, which is, I've forgotten his name, but he's an FBI negotiator.
FBI, yeah.
And it is such a good distillation of what a good consultation can be as well, which is you use tactical empathy. A lot of people don't like the word empathy if they are being wronged. So if your patient, your patient's creating a stink over something that's not your fault, that you get defensive. Whereas actually what you should use is tactical empathy and believe that there are causes for them to feel this way, find out what those causes are, and that puts you in the driving seat for resolving those. But it works the same with staff. You're going to have conflict with your staff if you have enough of them, and you need to figure out, assume the best of them, what is the driving force behind this, establish those, validate them. It's not the same thing as saying, I believe you're correct. This tactical empathy idea is that you establish what in their mind justifies their emotions, because even in your mind it doesn't justify their emotions, in their mind it does. And as soon as you have reflected that you understand what is causing the emotion driving it, you then have influence. Before you get to that point, you cannot influence someone because all you do is shout about different points of views. So that book is tremendously valuable in all sorts of ways when you're dealing with people. I can't think of anything else that's coming off that's leadership related. You've already mentioned one of my favorite books, which is 10x is easier than 2x, and some of the other Dr. Benjamin
Hardy?
Hardy, that's
Hardy,
right.
Yeah, with Dan Sullivan. Yeah, highly recommend that stuff. As a matter of fact, the Who Not How book is sort of part of my inspiration that you gave me, and my producer. Shout out to my producer Allie and Graham Copeland, who have helped me bring this vision here because partly because of meeting you and Layla and your team, David and Miranda. So I appreciate that. I hate to do this but I want to be respectful of your time because I'm having such a good time. I know I'll see you in Switzerland at the Inner Circle soon, but I will. We have a tradition here on this podcast of closing with a question that was selected at random from one of our listeners, right? And so I picked the question last night out of all our questions, and it was at random, so they don't know who's going to get the question, and I don't know who's going to go to. So here it is. Here's your question, Tim. Well, I guess it starts with a statement and then a question. Okay, so you are, this is good for you. You are well known for your work you do as your job or profession. When you are dead and gone, what 3 things you did or traits you displayed would you like to be remembered for as a human being? So 3 traits you explored or 3 things you did that you want to be remembered for.
I think it boils down to this idea I've already mentioned, which is I'd like to be remembered for being on people's side, and I would like people to be on each other's side, on the best of them, obviously, because not everyone's constructive in their intentions. But if you find someone who's got good intentions, be on their side, and I would like people to remember me for being on their side. That'd be a great thing to leave behind.
I love that, and it fits in quite well. So that's a great segue into me asking, for those who maybe live on a different planet and don't know who you are, what's the best way for them to find out more about you and engage with you and learn from you? Because I highly encourage everyone out there to at least, if you haven't been exposed to Tim's stuff, get exposed, see if he speaks to you, see if his work does it excites you, thrills you. We haven't even gotten into his consultation process. There's so much more. We'll have to try and unpack maybe another episode. But Tim, what's the best way for them to interact with you?
You can follow me at Dr. Tim Pearce on all the major social media channels. So just Google that and you'll find them. Whichever one you like using. If you search for Dr. Tim Pearce, you should find me.
Great. Well, look, again, I hate to do this because I'm having such a good time here, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to thank you for being on my side. Personally, I felt when I spoke to you last year that I was being heard, that I was being listened to, and that the advice you gave me was not canned. It was after thoughtful contemplation, and you took your time. And I want to extend my appreciation and thank you for doing that for me, because it has influenced my path, meeting you at the Inner Circle and then going onward. And then I want to thank you on behalf of all the, I don't even know how many gazillions of people by the effort. And guys, I want to tell you out there who's listening, it may look easy, but Tim does podcasts, Tim does YouTube videos, he does educational things, and it takes a bit of work and time, and he's an absolutely devoted father. So I want to just extend a thank you on behalf of everyone you've helped out there, and you continue to help, and I look forward to seeing you again in Switzerland.
My pleasure. Well, Lonny, let me say something about you, which is I remember first meeting you in Switzerland, and then you'd catch my eye at various points when I was crossing a room or something, and within 2 times meeting you, I realized this was going to be a lovely, warm interaction, almost no matter what. And you have a beautiful, I don't know what the right word would be, but a spirit, an aura, and I can tell that your intentions are beautiful, and you're exactly the kind of person whose side I am absolutely on. And the more people out there like you, the better. So I thank you for your work as well and your growth. I can see you're growing and doing new things, and that is good for everybody. So I'm really, really pleased to know you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tim. And I will use your son's quote. I'm just telling you. Jasper, thank you. And until next time, we'll sign off, okay?
All right. Thank you, Lonny.
Cheers, Tim. Thank you for your time. Thanks so much for tuning in. You know, we're on the journey in this aesthetic world together, and I firmly believe, and I know in my heart, that if we stay together, we'll be better than apart. Now I have a little favor to ask you. If you would just hit the subscribe button, it would mean a great deal to me personally, because it actually, your one action helps us to enhance the channel and bring you even more great content.